invite Paula Smith, Arapata Reuben and Alan Lim from the 3 zone committees to join us at the front of the table. Thank you. None of you is recognisable as Alan Lim.
You don't get Alan, I'm sorry.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I probably don't look much like Arapata either.
No, you don't. Right.
He sends his apology, as does the Deputy Chair. They're both unable to attend today. So I'm Kevin Brown. I'm a community member on the Christchurch West Mountain Zone Committee. I'll go first. The first thing we want to talk about is groundwater protection. One of the main issues at the moment for the Zone Committee is the groundwater modelling that's shown that there's groundwater from the Waimak district flowing underneath the Waimakariri River into the Christchurch City groundwaters. The modelling shows that there's a high probability of the deeper Christchurch aquifers receiving some of this water, and it also predicts that it'll affect particularly the northeastern sector groundwater over the longer term. At the moment, the principal focus has been on nitrate concentrations, which are predicted to increase. The Waimakariri district itself has some serious problems with nitrate concentrations in their groundwater, and the Waimakariri Zone Committee has been active in consultation with farmers in their area. Because of the modelling results, the Christchurch West Mountain Zone Committee, we've had 2 joint meetings with the Waimakariri Zone Committee, and after these meetings, the Christchurch Zone Committee commended the work being done by the Waimakariri Zone Committee in its targets for the nitrate limits in their groundwater. The consultation process with farmers in the Waimakariri area is now largely complete, and a staged approach to reducing the nitrate load is being proposed. This staged approach requires that farmers in the area will eventually require even better than good management practice in order to meet the targets. And this is quite severe. Current modelling suggests that the Christchurch drinking water in the affected areas in Christchurch City will rise slightly in the short to longer term, but will ultimately be less than 50% of the maximum allowable value within the proposed targets. Consequently, it's unlikely to result in a drinking water health hazard from the nitrate concentrations. I'll be presenting the information to the ITI committee next week in more detail, and I believe you have a meeting on Friday as well with the water fund where you hear more about it. So that was the groundwater, stormwater and streams. The Zone Committee is supportive of all efforts that improve the stormwater quality, which in turn improves the quality of the water in the urban streams and rivers. Last year, the Christchurch Zone Committee had a very successful public interaction at the Meet in the Middle event at Kerrs Reach, and at that, the Stormwater Superhero logo, which I believe you have in your agenda, was first used at this event. I was going to wear the t-shirt, but the frost this morning put me against it. We'll be present again at this year's event, and since then the logo has been used at many different events to do with stormwater. Zone Committee members in their Stormwater Superhero shirts have been present at outdoor film evenings, the Mother of All cleanups and other community events. One new aspect is we're looking to produce a mobile stormwater education resource, probably on something that is towable like a trailer, that can be located at public events. It'll be available to community groups, schools and so on to try and educate the general public on what happens to their stormwater. And in the process, to try and change the behaviour. Research shows that about 60% of Christchurch residents don't actually realise that drains lead to streams and rivers, and then mainly untreated to the sea. Better to restrict pollution of the stormwater through education rather than have to treat our rivers and streams at the end result. Better the fence at the top of the cliff rather than the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. The Zone Committee would like to thank the Council for promoting the copper-free brake pads motion at the recent local government forum. This was one of the stormwater programs that the Zone Committee initiated, so we thank you very much for that, and I hear it passed very successfully. 2 of our committee were present at a recent field day for developers and contractors to address the problems with erosion and sediment from primarily the Port Hills entering the Heathcote River. This is a particularly serious problem after the Port Hills fires, where the erosion is now greatly increased. The field day was the second such event. We held one last year, and it was extremely well attended. And I should add that there's recently been 2 significant fines imposed for breaches of the sediment control in this area, so as well as the carrot, there is the big stick. The Cashmere Stream, another nice thing, made the Cawthron New Zealand River Award finals for the restoration and planting work on the springs and the headwaters. There's a planting day this Saturday if councillors would like to see some of the immediate steps funding in action. It's up at the spring head of the Cashmere Stream. The Zone Committee is working with ECAN and the Council and volunteers to put in a possible funding application for the Heathcote to the Billion Trees Fund that the government is funding. Moving on, the Zone Committee is floating a revival of the concept of a drylands park. The concept was first proposed way back in 1997. Proposal was, and I quote, to capture the experience in broad vistas of formerly extensive primeval grasslands, shrublands and woodlands in the Canterbury Plains. The park would ensure the ongoing protection of the nationally unique in New Zealand dry grassland environment that would give a dry plains experience similar to the savannas, the veldt steppes, the American prairies or the South American pampas. Biotas such as the last significant stands of very old kowhai trees, which I'm sure you've all seen, close to Christchurch would be included in the park. Some of the land there is already under an ecological heritage status. We're currently in conversation with the biodiversity ranger at ECAN and the lease manager of the ECAN land about future opportunities for the park in the ECAN land south of the Waimakariri River. Deputations to the Zone Committee. Recent deputations to the committee included one from the East Lake Trust and the Avon Heathcote Kihutai Trust. The East Lake Trust were presenting their case for the East Lake in the red zone. There was some lively discussion afterwards. A number of questions arose, and these were addressed by the 2 trust members present. Additional information was required by the Zone Committee, and the East Lake Trust was going to make some of their submissions to regenerate Christchurch available to the Zone Committee. The Avon Heathcote Estuary Trust gave a presentation about the work of the Trust. One message to this council came out of the discussions was that the Trust expressed a preference for the dual cycleway walkway along Humphreys Drive to pass through Charlesworth Reserve adjacent to Humphreys Drive, rather than on the estuary side of the road. The Zone Committee congratulated the Trust on becoming an international flyway site, one of only 3 in New Zealand for the Godwits. Finally, at the most recent meeting of the Zone Committee, Belinda Margetts of the Christchurch City Council presented the results of the 2017 Surface Water Quality Monitoring Report. Unfortunately, the results confirm that the urban stream syndrome is still prevalent in Christchurch City, which just makes our stormwater superhero even more important. Thanks a lot.
Excellent, thank you very much. Now, I think probably because of the issues involved, we'll start with this one and then have questions and then move on to the other 2 if that's all right. Yeah, I knew Vicky would. Vicky, Phil, oh gosh, Pauline, Yanni, Andrew. I'm just mindful of the fact that we are time limited, but also that we have got a water forum on Friday week, tomorrow week. Yeah.
I will be very brief because I appreciate those. Just in terms of the leaching of the nitrates under the Waimak, what area of land is actually involved in the Waimak District Council that's responsible for that?
It has been reasonably well defined by the modelling. It's, I don't know quite how you express it, without a map here, it's west of Cust.
No, what land area? Like?
Oh, sorry, I haven't got that.
You don't know? Okay, I'll find out later.
I don't have those numbers.
Yeah, so Phil.
Thank you, Kevin. I just, the research you really were telling us about regarding the nitrate concentrates and groundwater coming from the Waimakariri district and impacting on aquifers. So I just wanted to were ECAN involved with that research too, or have they confirmed that that data you were?
Yeah, the modelling was through a multi-organisation approach. There was ECAN involved, there was Aqualink, there was GNS, so there were a large number of people, and there was some, they were trying to get agreement about the modelling. There have been some things in the past where agreement has not been reached, but as well as that, they drilled 9 special wells on both the Waimakariri side and on McLean's Island and out at West Melton, because their model was suggesting that there was a downflow in that area, and they drilled the wells to actually prove that there was indeed a downflow, and this was confirmed by the actual real measurements. So the modelling was a multi-organisation approach.
Thanks.
Thank you. Pauline? No? Andrew?
Thank you. Just referring to the very last line in the written information that we've got here, relating to the interzone groundwater nitrate issue. I mean, clearly this is something that we in Christchurch have got a significant interest in, given the interzonal nature of the problem. We don't have the benefit of an update of the type you've just given from the Waimakariri Zone Committee. Public feedback will be sought on the draft Waimakariri Zip Addendum Solutions Package in September. What process or what type of avenues are there for that feedback? Are there public meetings? Will there be a formal submissions and hearings process? What does public feedback look like, and what are the processes for capturing it?
This is still up in the air at the moment, but we're talking about things like a walk-in day, where we have both committees present and people can walk in off the street, and we'll all be there to answer questions. At the moment, I mean, there's a large consultation process currently going on in Waimakariri, very large, not so much in Christchurch.
And that's exactly what worries me, that, you know, we've got an issue that affects Christchurch, possibly affects Christchurch to a greater extent, or at least to the same extent as it affects Waimakariri, yet we're not involved in the consultation and the engagement to anything like the same degree. The Zone Committee recognises this as a problem, and there will be opportunities for public participation later on. But at the moment, they're still sorting out what's happening in Waimakariri. So that when that becomes finished, or when that comes to a conclusion, and we have a definite way forward, then there will be some. Excellent. So I guess my request really is, can we just make sure that we as a council are kept informed of our opportunity to participate, whether through our councillor representation on your committee, or through these updates, or by updates to our relevant committee, or whatever is
sure.
appropriate.
Well, Pauline's on our council, on the Zone Committee, sorry. Pauline's on our Zone Committee, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think that the Water Forum is also an opportunity where we sit down with ECAN, which is the other partner in the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, and and I think it will be really important that we, you know, bring Waimakariri, you know, into the picture, because, as you say, the strategies that they develop in relation to a much more immediate and pressing problem on their side of the river, in relation to their groundwater.
They do have serious problems.
They do.
Yes.
They do. I know that. Yeah. Yanni, did you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, I just was just really concerned around the silt runoff. Last night I went for a walk along the Heathcote River through closer to the Ferrymaid side, you know, and the estuary, and just people keep saying that they just can't believe the colour of the water, and so I just kind of wonder what we're actually doing. You've said that 2 people were prosecuted.
Yes.
It just seems to me like initially after the fires, I think we asked what was going on, and the advice back we had was we haven't seen it at an increased level than what would be normal, so we don't think there's been a huge impact. But just looking at the river and hearing from people that walk along the river, they seem to think that there has been a significant impact of sediment and stuff going into the river, especially at that lower level. So can you just give us any understanding of what other work we could do, we should do, to try and address that? if that's been actively discussed.
Probably not the best person to talk to, but there are, like I said, we had this field day, which was for contractors and developers who are developing things on the Port Hills, and there is ECAN has published a sediment guidelines. I need some help here. And there's a program, an app you can get into, and these show what you need to do for any particular place along the Port Hills to stop the sediment getting into the river. So stuff is available out there, and we've had 2 field days for contractors and developers. But basically this has been the wettest winter we've had for a very long time, and that of course,
which is why the water table's so high.
Do you think it's do you think having actually an active joint monitoring and enforcement regime rather than just guidelines would be beneficial? I mean, I just don't know how much monitoring goes on.
I'm not in that.
Yeah, I think these are questions that we should put on the agenda for the Water Forum.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's becoming quite urgent when we see the results from that survey
the
current approach isn't working.
Well, there are programs in place for retention ponds. The problem is that Port Hills are composed mainly of loess. Loess is wind-blown dust and dirt, basically. It's extremely fine. It's very hard to get out. A settlement pond quite often doesn't do it, and you need chemical treatment to flocculate the very small particles. So it is a difficult problem, and it's peculiar to the Port Hills because of the geological composition of the hills.
Thank you. Look, Paula Smith,
so that's an excellent segue into my next comment, which it is not peculiar to the Port Hills. It happens all over Banks Peninsula, and it's affecting the Selwyn catchments as well.
Right.
Sediment, it's our big issue. And the other point I would make is that the majority of people who live in the Banks Peninsula zone get their water supply from the groundwater systems that Christchurch City Council manages. So we're affected by, if there's a risk associated with nitrates, our communities are affected as well. Anyway, getting back to business, since I last came on the 7th of June, we've had 3 meetings. The first was in June on Governor's Bay, where we further explored forestry issues with both staff who provide advice about the new National Environmental Standard for Plantation Forestry, and from members of the public, and we're aware that the new NES will have an impact and will result in amendments both to the regional plans and to your Christchurch City Council district plan. 17th of July, our meeting was in Littleton, and we had a paper about the Perch Springs of Banks Peninsula, a presentation by University of Canterbury volcanologist Dr. Sam Hampton. There's a very high level of community interest in this matter, and from that were 2 recommendations mainly directed at council, because the information that we were presented highlighted the risks and opportunities for the management of the recharge zones for these groundwater systems, and the potential for problems with Christchurch City Council proposals for deep well injection of Akaroa's wastewater, and also possibly opportunities for community water supply at O'Kane's Bay, which might be cheaper and better, possibly. So, and also at that meeting, the Zone Committee allocated most of its $100,000 budget of immediate steps funding to 6 projects across Banks Peninsula. We also have resolved to have an annual funding round, a formal one, rather than just deal with these applications as they arrive, because we are now at the point where it's oversubscribed. And then the 3rd meeting we've had since I last spoke to you was at Birdings Flat on the 21st of August, where we had a deputation from the leader of the Akuti Valley project about the issue which is in your agenda about the fencing, about many things, one of which was that Akuti Valley is a spawning site for lamprey, but also about the fencing of the Esplanade Reserve, which was an issue that they've raised before, and I'm pleased to be able to tell you that that has since been resolved. At that meeting, it wasn't clear that the new fence was to be totally funded, but since then, apparently it now is, and the stock will be kept out of that particular section of Esplanade Reserve. And we also talked about briefly about the Christchurch City Council's global stormwater consent application, and we had a brief update on the council's Sites of Ecological Significance program. Our next meeting is on the 18th of September coming up. It's in Akaroa, and the main topic will be the new season's water quality monitoring results. So we've got our fingers crossed that we might see some improvement in at least some of our streams. We've also in the last month had an excellent face-to-face workshop, Pam and I, with ECAN councillors, and this and another couple of things that that have come up. One is the Akuti fence, and another issue about trying to get some names on some of our streams on local roads, on the bridges. They've made us think a bit about this forum as a means of communicating with you, this quarterly update report. And this is our one and only opportunity to interact at a governance to governance level with you people. And apart from our excellent member, Councillor Turner, who is on our committee, and I've just got a question about why it was that the zone committee's minutes stopped going to the ITI committee, and because to me, I mean, I'm even listening to the community board reports, there's a lot of interest in these water management things, and this doesn't seem like a particularly effective way to resolve things, or we have no ability to organise, hardly any ability to influence funding. We can't make submissions on the annual plan or anything like that, and I think there's a growing level of frustration about, you know, this level of conversation is not particularly effective. So I just wonder whether you might give that some thought.
I think what happened there is because we decided, well, I thought it was better to come to this forum because it was more inclusive for all councillors to hear what was going on. And I think we were doing it monthly, and now we've gone quarterly. But that was the intention, to actually have a broader forum and have more councillors involved rather than just the committee.
Anyway, I'll just leave that with you. You can have a talk amongst yourselves. Ask yourselves whether this is, do we add value to what you do by doing it this way? I don't know.
Well, the only reason really to bring it here is that councillors had no line of sight that we're in a partnership with ECAN over the zone committees through the Canterbury Water Management Strategy. And without a reporting line that brought all of the councillors around the table, it didn't seem to. But I mean, I agree that making deputations to committees isn't actually the most. I mean, essentially that's what you're doing. Isn't the effective way of decision making? No way. But that's not what this is for. This is to make sure that there is awareness and that there's public awareness. I mean, a lot of the issues that you've raised have ended up in the media because you've come and presented them to the council.
Yes, but it would be quite good to be able to have face-to-face conversations that were, not necessarily in that context.
No, well, I agree, and it seems to me that the water forum that we have with ECAN would be the most effective place for that to occur.
I'd be quite happy to have the minutes come through ITI as well, if that's what. If you think that would be a good idea.
Well, I don't know.
I mean, they could come every month to ITI.
Yeah.
And then we just have the quarterly forums here as well. That might be the way forward.
And then if there's a particular issue that wants to come up, but I think I'd rather also find a way of wrapping this into the water forums that we're having, sort of bi-monthly with ECAN.
Yeah. But I wonder why we as zone committees aren't at the water forum. If there is something going on talking about water, why aren't we there as zone committees?
I'm sorry, look, we established a relationship with ECAN, and started a governance to governance meeting arrangement between councillors and commissioners at the time, and subsequently it split into two, and 1 month would be a water forum, and then the following time but they're only held every 2 months, are they? I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but and then the next 2 months it's a generic one, so it's not a water forum all the time. But I mean, it's a perfectly valid point that's been raised, and I've just said that wouldn't it be better to provide an inclusive way of bringing the zone committees into the water forum. The next one is Friday week, so just leave it with us and we'll see what we can do. Andrew.
Thank you. A couple of questions, and just picking up your point, Paula, on the minutes. Where do the minutes currently go? Obviously they come back to the committee to be reported back at its next meeting, but do those minutes currently get reported to ECAN or the City Council in any formal way?
I don't think they come to the City Council in any formal way. Do
They
they
come
used to
to
come to the
the-
Community Board.
Yeah, they do come to the community board. They are circulated.
For a
twice,
while they
Andrew.
stopped going there too.
It's, I mean, in my view, it's appropriate they come to the community board, but it may well be that we consider bringing them to ISI as well, as Pauline has suggested. So, and at ECAN, do they go? Are they reported to the ECAN council, the
I
elected
can't answer
council?
that question, I'm sorry. We meet in the same way with ECAN once every 2 or 3 months, I think, isn't it? That we go to the meetings.
So it looks as
It's
if
not very
this could-
frequent anyway,
so it
and
looks
I'm
as
not
if this
sure
could
whether
do with
they.
some tidying up.
I'm not sure whether they see our minutes or not. Sorry.
Okay, and then a more specific question on the report itself. The paragraph just before the picture in the report that relates to Sam Hampton's presentation on the Perch Springs. There were 2 recommendations, the first of which was that these findings be considered in decisions about the future management of drinking water supplies, particularly in O'Kane's Bay, and the second of which relates to providing Sam Hampton with an opportunity to evaluate the results of the deep bore injection trials for the Akaroa wastewater disposal. Have you had, as chair of the committee, any response back from the City Council as to how those 2 recommendations have landed or how they're going to be dealt with?
No, the only communication we've had has been from you.
So again, it worries me that there are recommendations that have come from the committee which need to be picked up somewhere.
I don't know where they
as
go.
part of a process,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure where that, you know, the formal process for dealing with those recommendations, but there are 2 things here that need to be picked up because they're both important, and I would hate to see those recommendations just disappear and not be picked up in any meaningful way, particularly when there are community members that may well have become aware, not least through this report, of the second of those recommendations, and therefore have a reasonable expectation that a well-trusted person in the form of Sam Hampton will have some evaluation input into the results of the deep well injection, which is going to be a matter of huge public opinion anyway.
So could I just make a comment that we did have a briefing from Mike Burke at our community board meeting at a seminar last Monday, and Mike did say in the conversation that Sam Hampton had actually been up at the drilling site when they were removing a core sample. So Sam has obviously already got a working relationship with the city at the moment.
The point that Councillor Turner's making, though, I think he's responding to the actual report from the Banks Peninsula Zone Committee, which is to request that there's a specific role for him in terms of his independence and status at the university. Is that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just providing
There's a
advice.
role that the
Yeah.
committee wants him to play in terms of the results of the deep well injection trial. The zone committee, quite rightly, in response to a detailed and really interesting presentation, have made a recommendation. But as a member of the zone committee and as a member of this council, I need to be confident that that will be picked up in some formal way.
So, perhaps the easiest way would be to simply, in receiving these reports, note the request of the Banks Peninsula Zone Committee for, what's the wording here? Requesting CCC consider providing Sam Hampton with an opportunity to evaluate the results of the deep bore injection trials for the Akaroa wastewater disposal and refer the matter to staff.
Perfect.
So, I mean, that way we're noting that that's your recommendation and we're referring it to the management of the organisation.
Thank you, but that doesn't really overcome the difficulty that Councillor Turner has identified in that we make recommendations which go nowhere.
No,
So-
I know, but I'm trying to
And you're picking
find,
up here,
I'm
which is
trying
good,
to
but this
find
is
a
just-
solution
Yes.
to a particular problem that has been raised on
That's
this
right.
occasion. It
Thank-
doesn't solve the problem.
Yes.
Yes, yes, I'm very, very aware of this now. I wish it had been in your report, and then I could have taken some advice on what we might have been able to
Don't
do.
have any influence over that report.
Really?
Oh, my verbal, that's the only way I get my 2 cents in.
But the section that says Banks Peninsula Water Management Committee, the committees themselves don't have any input into.
I don't see them before they come to you, no.
Okay, all right. Well, that might be another element that we will look at as well. So thank you for your free and frank disclosures in front of the
Thank you for
council
providing me with a
today.
very public forum for my free and frank.
Well, you wouldn't have got this far without
Oh, thank you.
without coming to the council. So, all right. So if I could just now hand over to the person who isn't Alan Lund.
Tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm have been Siwanwahora Zone Facilitator, so I work for Environment Canterbury, and apologies on behalf of Alan Lynn, who has been involved in the preparation of this material. Just want to focus on one aspect that Alan wanted to share and I guess celebrate with you, which was the joint workshop of the Zone Committee with the Tiwahura co-governors at Ngāti Moki Marae at Taumutu, which is pretty significant. For those, and I hope shouldn't be any on the council, but the Tiwahura co-governors are representatives of Ngāi Tahu, this council, Environment Canterbury councillors and Selwyn District Council. The significance is that, I guess, to get a healthy lake, there's a couple of things need to be done. Serious improvements in the catchment itself, and also some intervention, some action in the lake itself. It's always been very, very clear to the Zone Committee and indeed to others that anything in the lake needs to be led by Ngāi Tahu, and I guess that leadership is through the Tiwahura co-governors. So it's very, very significant because the Zone Committee has focused its actions on trying to get the game lifted in terms of particularly farming in the catchment. So it's very significant to have the Tiwahura co-governors and the Zone Committee having a delightfully full and frank communication and conversation actually on the marae on the shore of Tiwahura. The only other thing that I want to touch on is to, I guess, remind the councillors that the so-called refresh of the Zone Committee community members will start from next week. So community members on the Zone Committee serve 3-year terms. So at the end of this year there will be different numbers of community members' terms across all of the 10 Zone Committees that effectively come up for, they're finished, and so there's a process for seeking expressions of interest from anyone who has an interest in water in particular zones to apply, and then there's a process, a selection process that certainly a number of councillors have been involved in the past. So the refresh process, I guess, is launched the start of next week, and I guess expression of interest, I think the final date for those is in mid-October. So I would encourage all of the councillors, if they can think of people who would be interested in joining Zone Committees, encourage them to apply, because the strength of Zone Committees is in the community members, and it's important to get a lot of people applying so that you ultimately have, as part of the selection working group, and the councillors are, to actually get a good choice. I always, as one of the people that help facilitate those, I celebrate when those selection working groups have a really difficult job. Kia ora.
Very good. Are there any questions? All right, so I've got, no, I haven't got a mover and a seconder, but I'm just wondering whether we want to add another resolution. I was just busy trying to word it, but something along the lines of request staff to meet with the zone committee representatives and develop a mechanism for ensuring that it's kind of like we take input from the community boards when we're doing the LTP and the annual plans. So it's kind of like ensuring that appropriate engagement or appropriate but it's information request, but it's also they want to input into decisions around the plans that we make in terms of allocation of funding for particular things, you know. So for ensuring appropriate input into the relevant council decision making processes. So it's just to just try and, I mean, I'm not trying to write the solution. I'm just trying to write the wording for getting it. Anyway, if we ask them to meet with zone committee representatives to develop a mechanism for ensuring appropriate input into relevant council decision-making processes and report back what in
October or something?
Yeah, it'll be the, when are you due to come back? December. Oh no, we'd want to do that. Report back by the end of
the year.
Well, report back by the end of November, so that way we could actually have a paper that ties in with their meeting.
Would that be the zone committee facilitators, perhaps, rather than the representatives?
I don't know. Well, I was just trying to think of a
staff to staff thing, isn't it? Really?
That's the point. We are a committee of you.
Yeah.
We are your committee. This is a governance role that we are in. And it's not a staff to staff thing.
Yeah.
And we're becoming really frustrated because we have no ability to influence staff.
I'm hearing you. I'm definitely hearing you. So if we leave it at the representatives, then that can be the councillor representatives and the chairs. So, and I don't think we need to just say more than that. We'd just leave it to the to the proper conversations having. And I'm just also want to kind of almost direct ourselves to discuss this at the Water Forum next week as well.
We have got a bit of a gap. We don't hear anything from the regional committee, so I'm wondering if we want to do something about that. Do they want to report through here as well, or?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, that's right. Yep, happy to. Yep.
Yeah, well, Sarah's our representative on the regional one, but you know, it's who chairs the regional one?
Who's the new chair?
Hugh Logan.
That's right. The new chair. So.
Right. Okay.
So can I just ask, does the regional committee get all the minutes from all the other committees?
Each committee has a representative on the regional committee, but they kind of deal with Canterbury issues rather than, is that right? Rather than specific individual zone matters. In fact, they do stuff that a lot of the time we're not very interested in, with no disrespect.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We get a report back from each of the zones at the regional the committee meetings. Yeah.
And all the meetings are public and the minutes and everything are all, yeah, online and available. Just like the PT committee and the land transport, yeah, they're all, yeah.
Yep. Look, I don't want to kind of hold this up, but I mean, we can easily put this on the agenda for the water forum next week. We don't need a resolution to do that. Andrew?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I think today's presentations and the discussion that's resulted from them has highlighted that there are some unusualities, for want of a better expression, in terms of the way that the zone committees relate to council. The idea that we've got governance bodies which are a governance body of council, or a joint governance body of council that have got no realistic way of reporting into council and reporting their resolutions into council in any formal sense, does seem very unusual. You know, we wouldn't have community boards that passed recommendations that then didn't report those in any meaningful way to council so that we as governors could make a decision on them. It appears that the recommendations coming out of the zone committees are dealt with by staff rather than us as governors. If the mechanism is that we need to pick up those recommendations by way of passing resolutions at meetings like this, so be it. But I don't think that was what was intended. I think we've actually, through a number of conversations, uncovered that the way for dealing with these resolutions, these recommendations coming out of the zone committees is less than ideal. Also, to have committees that aren't able to submit on council policy documents, submissions, financial plans and so on, doesn't seem to be a good outcome either. At the same time, we've had a highlight from another one of the zone committees today that finding community members to serve on these committees may be problematic. Again, people will be willing to volunteer their time for meaningful roles where they can make a difference. But to have a role on a committee where there seems to be some doubt as to the actual ability of that committee to influence anything in a real sense, I think that probably leads into the recruitment problem that was discussed today as well. I'd actually like to see this whole thing discussed at the next water forum, or as soon as we can, because it looks as though there are some constitutional issues around these zone committees that need to be dealt with, that may well become more relevant as we move into an environment with a fully elected environment, Canterbury, than in an atmosphere where there's been a lot more goodwill around the CWMS. Moving into a more political environment in the future, I think we need to get this tied down now before that happens. So I'd quite like to see all of the issues that have been raised today referred to the Water Forum for a good discussion between governors.
Yeah, and I've just said that we'll pop it on the agenda. So would someone like to move the motion that we have in front of us? Andrew, seconded Phil. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate your hard work on behalf of Canterbury.